Welcome to South Shore United Church Good Friday worship time. This is Reverend Karen McLeod Wilkie and Paul Wilkie sharing with me in leadership this afternoon. I would also welcome you to return to join with us on Sunday for an Easter Sunday service. In that service, we will celebrate communion together across the miles. So I invite you to have bread and juice ready for that service when it comes. Also on Sunday morning, Jack Sorensen will have our church bells ringing between 10:30 and 11 a.m. in the morning. You are invited to drive by and hear the ringing of the bells and feel that hope in your heart. Paul and I will greet you by waving to you from the church steps that we may connect with one another at this special time. Now let us prepare to worship this Good Friday. The cross calls us to face suffering.
The cross holds one who transforms shame and judgment to forgiveness and hope.
The cross invites us near to discover our own courage to keep watch.
The cross reminds us to share compassion.
The cross challenges us to hold on to trust. Let us sing together. Let us unite our voices in prayer. Give us the endurance, the patience, the courage, O God, to walk with Jesus the hard road to the cross. Enable us, like the women, to stay with him through the physical agony and the cruel taunting of the soldiers. Let us hear, like the crucified criminals, the words of hope, comfort, and hope. Help us to express our grief and loss, our sense of aloneness and abandonment, trusting in the end that you are with us, and bring us back again on Easter morning to discover the new life you keep promising for all. We pray as Jesus taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
After mocking him, they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. As they went out, they came upon a man from Cyrene named Simon. They compelled this man to carry Jesus' cross.
Have you ever been forced to carry someone else's load? Not that you volunteered, but that you were commanded to do so? A tired child demanding to be carried, a lonely parent demanding your attention, a work situation demanding overtime, and so many other such experiences. How did it feel? Were you resentful? Or did you sense the pain of this other person and willingly give your support? We don't know how Simon felt, but he carried the cross for Jesus. Sometimes it is difficult to enter into the suffering of another person, but Simon did so for Jesus.
And when they came to a place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull, they offered him wine to drink mixed with gall. But when he tasted it, he would not drink it.
Jesus refused the wine mixed with a drug that would have numbed him to all that was happening. It wasn't that he wanted to have the pain, rather that he didn't want to lose those last hours with those closest to him. He had more he wanted to share with them.
And when they had crucified him, they divided his clothes among themselves by casting lots. Then they sat down there and kept watch over him. Over his head they put the charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." The two bandits were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests also, along with the scribes and elders, were mocking him, saying, "He saved others. He cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross now, and we will believe him. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now, if he wants to, for he said, 'I am God's son.'" The bandits who were crucified with him also taunted him in the same way.
Have you ever been mocked or bullied, ridiculed by people you have known, or perhaps felt the judgment of strangers? Jesus shows us how to bravely face such situations. He was mocked by high priests and elders, by soldiers and the criminals, by the crowds who didn't understand him. But Jesus didn't allow their ridicule to define him or to affect how he chose to respond to his situation.
Then Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." One of the criminals who were hanged there kept deriding Jesus and saying, "Are you not the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other rebuked him, saying, "Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed have been condemned justly. We are getting what we deserve for our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong." And then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus replied, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise."
When Jesus said, "Father, forgive them," It's not clear to whom he is directing his words. They seem to drift from his lips and descend upon all who have hurt him in any way, from Pilate and Caiaphas and people in positions of power, to those who actually carried out the flogging and act of crucifixion, right down to his closest friends, and to the strangers he didn't even know who were hanging right beside him. There is a power and weight to Jesus' words. Forgiveness isn't something that he tries to do alone. He draws on the compassion of the one who created him. Father, forgive them. As one of the bandits beside him tried to shame the other, "Don't you fear God, for we deserve what we're getting?" Jesus then shifted the focus from ridicule and fear to hope. Today, you will be with me in paradise. Jesus' message reached to all who would listen. Don't give in to the energy of fear. Don't be defined by judgment or punishment or shame. Let forgiveness free you for hope.
Meanwhile, standing near the cross of Jesus was his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Cleopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing beside her, he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her into his own home.
I admire the courage and compassion of those who stood near the cross. The agony of their hearts must have been so great, watching their loved one die with such suffering. But they held fast. They didn't turn away. They stayed with him to the end. By their presence, they offered Jesus opportunity to speak final words to them, to clear his heart and mind before finally releasing his spirit. Jesus shared his feeling of responsibility toward his loved ones, his mother, and his disciples. He didn't want to leave them feeling uncared for. So he commissioned them to care for each other. It's a final reminder of his earlier words, "Love one another as I have loved you." The identity of the beloved disciple is never made clear to us, but in many ways, this disciple is representative for us. We all are beloved disciples, and as we face the many griefs life brings to us, we are asked by Jesus to care for one another.
From noon on, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And about 3 o'clock, Jesus cried with a loud voice, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of the bystanders heard it, they said, "This man is calling for Elijah." At once, one of them ran and got a sponge, filled it with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it to him to drink. But the others said, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to save him." John's Gospel tells us that Jesus said, "It is finished." Luke's Gospel reports, "Then Jesus, crying with a loud voice, said, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." Then he bowed his head and gave up his spirit.
I wonder how Jesus' friends felt as they listened to the utter desolation of Jesus' cry, my God, why have you forsaken me?" I wonder if they felt a wrenching helplessness in the face of his suffering. Have you ever been at a loss for words, or wished there was some action you could take that would change things for someone you love, but there was nothing you could do? Yet even as they stood there offering loving support, they would have realized for Jesus to even express such a cry was an affirmation that God was with him. To address his words to God showed Jesus trusted God was listening. These were the final words according to Matthew. John's Gospel, however, recalls Jesus sharing with his friends a sense of completeness. It is finished. When you think of it, those too are words of hope. Suffering is finished. The work is done. And there is a hidden promise. There's something beyond the suffering. Luke's writing shares the memory of Jesus actively releasing his life into God's hands. Again, a promise. More is to come.
After these things, Joseph of Arimathea, who was a disciple of Jesus, though a secret one, asked Pilate to let him take away the body of Jesus. Pilate gave him permission, so he came and removed his body. Nicodemus, who had at first come to Jesus by night, also came, bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, weighing about 100 pounds. They took the body of Jesus and wrapped it with the spices in linen cloths, according to the burial custom of the Jews. Now there was a garden in the place where he was crucified, and in the garden there was a new tomb in which no one had ever been laid. And so, because it was the Jewish day of preparation, and the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there.
Jesus' life had a considerable effect not only on his closest friends and followers, but also upon those he met only briefly, like Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus. Even though both of these people had kept out of the action during Jesus' ministry, they courageously stepped forward at his time of death to provide dignity by asking for his body so he could be properly buried and honored. We may not always know the lives of those we touch from day to day, when our words will shift someone's fears or cheer someone to new action in their life, when our contributions to the world may ripple across nations. Nicodemus and Joseph remind us our lives matter. So we take courage and we take action for love.
It is finished.
Jesus' physical presence among us is over.
From the darkness of the tomb
comes the promise of new possibilities.
the time of waiting has begun.
But the story is not over.
Let us go out into the world to watch and to wait
for the unveiling of the risen Christ among us. Let us go, sustained by the communion of God's Spirit, filled by the love of God, and willing to follow Jesus.